Hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Buckets. We are back with NBA news, and unfortunately this one's going to be a little bit of a doozy because our primary story is revolving around Joel Embiid, and unfortunately it seems to be a little bit of a discourse minefield, so watch me as I step through this minefield and hopefully do not blow up. So first things first, where this is all stemming from is that Joel Embiid said before the season that he is going to be playing not back-to-back games, essentially. He is only going to play when he really has to, and he's going to be very deliberate about trying to avoid injury as much as possible. This, of course, stemming from the fact that for pretty much every postseason, the guy has dealt with some sort of nagging injury or another, whether it be stuff that literally could have taken his vision out, or different lower body injuries that slow him down dramatically. I have generally been someone who's been pretty critical of Joel Embiid in the postseason, but honestly, I've kind of changed my mind about that. Honestly, most of the things that I said basketball-wise more than 2 years ago, I've just really changed my philosophy in many ways, but that's a whole other topic that I might eventually make a video about. But Joel Embiid's injury stuff, when you watch him in majority of the postseasons he's been in, you can visually see that he is not the same player that he is during these regular seasons. And he has, in spite of that, in spite of these injuries that dramatically slow him down, that make him a significantly worse player, and that cause pain that he has to play through, Embiid still does it. And he does it every time, without fail, only to proceed to be criticized nonstop for his underperformance, mostly with the context of these injuries being entirely ignored. So I'm going to play this clip from him during an interview, I think it was preseason.
Between the Olympics and today, that you would be taking this approach and missing these games to start the season?
It was never decided. Like I said, it's that everybody has been on the same page. If your body doesn't react well, and if your body tells you one thing, and I've done it. From what I can tell you, I've broken my face twice. I came back early with the risk of losing my vision. Had broken fingers. I still came back. So I'm not gonna sit here and be when I see people saying doesn't want to play, I've been way too much. I've done way too much, for this city, and putting myself at risk, for people to be saying that. So I do think it's bullshit. Like that dude, not Marcus, whatever his name is. I've done way too much for this fucking city to be treated like this. So. Don't way too fucking much. But like I said, I wish I was as lucky as other ones, but that doesn't mean that I'm not trying that, I'm not, doing whatever it takes to be out there, which I'm gonna be here pretty soon.
Pretty much agree with Embiid across the board on that. He has played through these injuries enough times that I really don't understand why his willingness to play is even remotely in question. The guy has clearly showed that he wants to be out there. He's clearly displayed emotion over Philadelphia's playoff failures in the past. Literally, the most famous meme of him is him crying after leaving the game versus Toronto. I think questioning Embiid's passion and willingness to play is fucking ridiculous. And unfortunately, Marcus Hayes decided to do this version of criticism in the most ridiculous and dehumanizing way possible. So I'm just going to read the line that essentially pissed off Joel Embiid, and as far as I'm concerned, extremely rightfully so. Joel Embiid consistently points to the birth of his son Arthur as the major inflection point of his basketball career. He often says that he wants to be great to leave a legacy for the boy named after his little brother, who tragically died in an automobile accident when Embiid was in his first year as a 76er. Well, in order to be great at your job, you need to show up for work. Embiid has been great at just the opposite. Now in his 11th season, he's consistently been in poor conditioning. This poor conditioning apparently seems to have delayed his debut this season. That's a bunch of horse shit. If you want to make an argument about Embiid not being healthy enough or not having good enough conditioning, you are free to do that. Invoking his dead brother and his son in order to do that is fucking ridiculous and entirely unnecessary. Like, the morality aspect of this aside, it's just literally unnecessary. I don't understand why you had to bring this up. It is making it extremely personal for no reason. And what Embiid said about, like, I'm doing too much for this city to be treated like that, even if he didn't do jack fucking shit for this city, I don't think invoking the name of his dead brother and his son is even remotely appropriate. In general, when talking about the family members of these NBA players, it's pretty much never appropriate to bring them up in just about any context. If it's something like, for example, Isaiah Thomas's sister dying before a playoff game, that is something that is huge and impacts the result quite a bit and should be mentioned. However, this is not necessary in any capacity. Bringing them up was not necessary in any capacity. So as a result, Joel Embiid assaulted, according to Keith Pompey, another Sixers beat writer, that he assaulted a reporter in the locker room. There was a bunch of speculation about what exactly the word assaulted meant. Keith apparently, from what I understand, you see this tweet was edited. I think there was one before it that got deleted where it seemed like he was the one who implied there was a punch. I could be mistaken about that because there were some deleted tweets and I kind of got onto the situation a little bit later than others, but it was a very dramatic night in the NBA as a result of this. But it turned out to be a shove, not a punch, and to me, I do think there is a rather dramatic difference between those two. A shove is really more of a warning than anything else, whereas a punch is just outright assault, to be fair. That said, immediately, a complete shitstorm revolving around this. First, on the front of like criticizing Joel Embiid because there is this perception that it was a punch, but then criticizing the reporting of it after the fact. And as far as I'm concerned, after reading that, where he entirely unnecessarily brought up the man's brother and son, I think he would have had every right to punch him, let alone shove him. To quote the great Matt Barnes, "Violence is never the solution, but sometimes it is." And the way I feel about this is that, yeah, not much positive pretty much ever comes out of violence. Most things can be resolved with words, and having a violent response is more just a sign of lack of maturity and lack of flexibility in any capacity to, like, disagree with somebody without moving it to being physical. However, this is a point of emotion for Joel Embiid, a very strong point, and rightfully so. And it is a nerve that was not necessary to touch in any capacity at all. So I think it's completely justified to shove the guy. I'll tell you what, I don't have any family members who have died tragically, thank God. However, if I did, and I didn't upload a video for a couple of weeks because of it, and then someone said, wow, you clearly aren't all that dedicated to your loved ones or some shit, I would have hands for you too, although it would probably be through a fucking comment, so I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. But my point being, don't bring up a man's family and expect no repercussions. It makes complete sense that it happened. And unfortunately, there is this perception a lot around, like, especially when you're a 7-foot giant athlete, of like this angry black man thing where you are perceived to just be this violent creature. And the moment that you do something, to me, fairly menial as a shove, there is this moral grandstanding and all of these people acting like it's the worst thing that ever happened. And again, on this dehumanizing front, to bring this up about Embiid at all, and again, a lot of the subsequent commentary that's come up after the fact is completely ignoring the fact that the dude is a human. And I think that has been something that largely gets ignored with NBA players in general and athletes in general. At some point, I want to make a video on the main channel about the dehumanization of athletes, people having these expectations for these guys to essentially not be emotional in any capacity, and also beyond that, expecting them to just be these robots that play basketball for you all the time, and then the moment that someone is injured all the time or trying to do stuff to prevent those injuries, that's not, you know, trying to avoid pain and suffering and trying to make it to where you're better at your job on a later day rather than a meaningless back-to-back game in a regular season. Throwing aside what this guy legitimately has reason to be concerned about and saying, you're paid to do this job, why aren't you doing it? Now, there are limitations to that kind of reasoning. Like, sure, there's definitely players who have pushed it to where they're using that more as an excuse than the actual reality. I don't want to invoke Ben Simmons here because I don't think it's safe ever to say shit about that, especially as it relates to mental health. But that was a very common criticism that I at least think makes a little bit more sense than this one. Because again, if we are hearkening back to all of Joel Embiid's Philadelphia tenure, this guy has played through injury after injury after injury. He has proven time and time again his dedication to playing for this team in spite of having to deal with those injuries. So there is no reason for this. There is no basis in this criticism, and especially for that criticism to already be bullshit, but let alone you invoke the dude's son and deceased brother. Fuck that, and fuck Marcus Hayes for this. As far as I'm concerned, Embiid should have punched the guy, and he would have had every right to. Don't condone violence 9 times out of 10, but there are a lot of fucking people in this world who love to do shit that is worthy of getting punched in the face, and then they act surprised when they get punched in the face. This is the way of the world to an extent that you have to understand, and I think this is a cry bully thing. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna poke at this guy, poke the bear, see what happens. No, man, that's on you. And I have no sympathy for him. In fact, like I said, fuck Marcus Hayes, and I have all the sympathy in the world for Joel Embiid. However, apparently his general managers do not share that same backing up of him. Now, this report came out with Keith Pompey, again, as I mentioned, with the assault. And then following that, there was no punch. Shams reports the Sixers Joel Embiid got in an altercation with a columnist following tonight's game in Philadelphia. Embiid took issue with a recent column that referenced his late brother and son, and Embiid shoved the columnist. No punch. But after this, Hayes said that he was escorted to a meeting with Sixers president of basketball operations Daryl Morey and general manager Elton Brand. Hayes said that Morey and Brand apologized for the incident, expressed regret that it happened, and asked me for my versions of events. And worst of it all, they agreed that Embiid's actions were unacceptable. No, I think writing about the dude's family was unacceptable. Far more than a shove was. I think you're being a little fucking overdramatic. People acting like a shove is the worst thing that could ever happen to you. It really is just something that's a little bit off-putting for a second, and then you move on. It's more a warning shot than it is anything else. And again, if anything, I think it was an underreaction for what many people are reasonably capable of responding to a situation like this with. What's worse to me about the shove or the Hayes article or all of this, I think Daryl Morey and Elton Brand backing up Hayes on this and apologizing and saying these actions were unacceptable, as far as I'm concerned, that is malpractice from a front office, because for the most part, you want to be supporting your superstar player. And look, if they make some actions that are actually complete horseshit, you can't stand by it. I'm not taking some loyalty approach of like, you should back your superstar no matter what they do. But in this instance, in the context in which it happened, you should absolutely back the guy up, especially if you're trying to have a relationship beyond a professional one with the guy, if you want him to trust you, to perceive that you have his best interest in mind. If you're going to say stupid horse shit like this and give this asshole his credit or say, apologize to him for something that he brought upon himself, that's horseshit to me. It's extremely whack, and it shows the franchise not being willing to back the guy when they very much should. And I've seen a lot of people, since this specific report has come out, suggesting that Joel Embiid would be well within his right to ask out after all of this drama. And while I don't think things will escalate to that point, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I also don't know how they're going to proceed going forward with Hayes in terms of him being in the locker room. I don't love that the dude who says this shit about his family just gets unpermissible access to the guy's fucking place of work constantly after every game. It's a messy situation, and I understand the initial reaction to just be like, Embiid is not justified in doing this. I get it. I get how you can perceive this as unacceptable. But to me, I think you are ignoring the human element of this and expecting Embiid to just be perfect. And, well, look, I don't think shoving him was necessarily the solution to this issue. At the same time, what else was fucking happening? Was anybody else calling him out for this article before this went down? No. I didn't even know the fucking article existed. So on that front, I completely understand and support Joel Embiid on this. And lately, over the past couple of years, man, I have been feeling more and more like Joel Embiid gets mistreated. That shit, oh my fucking God. I forgot to mention this. I'm not going to bother digging through the clip. I should have had Rudy pull it up. But Charles Barkley and Shaq were talking about this not playing back-to-back games. And the fucking horseshit that was coming out of both of their mouths was ridiculous. First of all, Shaq said that Embiid was not a paint player just because he shoots jump shots sometimes, which is fucking ridiculous because he is a paint player. He's a high volume paint player, both as a finisher, but also in terms of dealing with physicality, he is getting busted up all the time in terms of getting to the free throw line. I know people love to act like Joel Embiid just gets a finger on him and then that gets him free throws. And sure, that does happen sometimes. However, the guy is banging in the post constantly. He is getting hit constantly. He is taking contact constantly while being an extremely injury-prone player. Fucking Charles Barkley and Shaq essentially acting like the guy is a pussy because he gets hurt when they didn't. It's fucking dumb. They're like, oh, back in our day, we played this way. We didn't miss games. We took pride in our work. It is not as simple as that. It's a bunch of boomer-ass mentality, and the state of the NBA right now is you do not play through injuries unless you have to, and you really don't do it. It's really encouraged not for you to do it at all, and Joel Embiid fucking does it anyways. So all of this criticism has been dumb. I feel bad for Joel Embiid, and look, I get it. The guy is a multi-millionaire athlete who plays basketball for a living. It's a great life to have, and there's not a lot of reasons to complain in that context. However, this situation is entirely justified, and I'm sure there's going to be people who disagree with me in the comments about it. I don't care. All right, I'm on Joel Embiid's side on this one. All right, let's quickly go over some injuries. Unfortunately, Paolo Banchero is going to be out for quite a while, out until at least December with a torn oblique. That does worry me about Orlando's playoff prospects because the Eastern Conference is low-key more competitive than it's often given credit for, and I think a long stretch without him could be a problem. Kristaps Porzingis' foot out until December 1st. I think that was already known. Maybe that was a prolonged an extra addition to the timeline. Ben Simmons back. Shocker, is going to be out until November 8th. Isaiah Jackson for the Indiana Pacers unfortunately tore his Achilles and he is out for the season, which fucking sucks because Isaiah Jackson was a really, really good backup center for them. You hate to see an Achilles injury pretty much ever happen. Kawhi Leonard's out until December 1st, just like Porzingis. As we have touched on briefly, his trainer is suing the Clippers. We'll get more on that in the future. DeJounte Murray with a hand injury is out until the end of November, plus all 4 other starters for New Orleans are also all dealing with injuries. Jalen Williams and Isaiah Hartenstein are all out until at least December 3rd, and Scotty Barnes is going to be out until November 21st. On the positive end of things, Chris Middleton, Paul George, as well as a few other role players are going to be returning this week, so it's not all bad news, but a lot of injuries happening out of the gate is actually pretty typical for the start of an NBA season because of a lot of people being not really conditioned already, trying to get themselves back into NBA shape, which is unfortunately a kind of vicious cycle where you get those injuries early because you're out of shape and then you don't end up recovering very well because you're out of shape. I'm just going to go over these standings real quick and give you my take on them, how much I think think they're actually going to be able to maintain this. The Cavaliers are 7-0. Obviously, they're not going to not lose a game for the entire season, but if you told me after what I have seen thus far that they end up being a 60-win team, that wouldn't really shock me. And there's a lot of discussion about the prospect of them potentially being the second best team in the Eastern Conference, which I think is a valid conversation to be having. The Celtics with one loss thus far, that surprises nobody. Knicks have been kind of weird thus far. Karl Anthony Towns has had a 44-point game, but also had some games where he looked like he just didn't belong out there, so there is that. Mikal Bridges' jump shot concerns are luckily not really actually worthy of concern. As it turns out, he's been shooting the ball just fine. The Heat are the 4 seed, not much to say about them. The Magic are the 6 seed, actually a fucking losing record being the 6 seed. Man, the East sucks. The Chicago Bulls are 3-3 right now. It drives me fucking nuts. Nikola Vucevic is playing really good. Begrudgingly, I must admit that Josh Giddey has been playing good to start the year. Not a huge fan of that. I hope they start to lose some more, but if Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic want to up their trade value by playing really well to start the year, I'm not going to complain too much about that. Hawks down below them, they've looked a little bit better. Jalen Johnson has had some turnover issues, but other than that, there's not too much negative to say about them. The Nets have managed to look fairly competitive, primarily due, Cam Thomas is the main reason, because he's been just a complete bucket and not inefficient in the process of getting them, at least not as inefficient as anticipated. But also Dennis Schroeder has been fantastic for them. Putting up real numbers and starting to look a little bit more like the leading starting point guard that he was hyped up to be out of Atlanta. Toronto is struggling in spite of the fact that RJ Barrett has averaged 30 over his last couple of games. The Pistons get a win against the New York Nets, the Brooklyn Nets. I guess they are in New York, but whatever. Sixers 1-4 without Embiid and Paul George, as I previously mentioned, and the Milwaukee Bucks 1-5, losing a game off of a game winner to Donovan Mitchell. Now, the two-man game between Giannis and Dame did look substantially better in that game than it had in any of the other ones, but then it came down to the rest of their teammates not really doing all too well, and the perimeter defense continuing to be complete dog shit. The OKC Thunder are the only other undefeated team thus far, being 6-0. The Phoenix Suns and Golden State Warriors are 5-1 and will likely be 6-1 after today, because they're playing the Sixers with just Paul George and Maxey in the case of the Suns, and the Warriors are playing, I think it was the Nets, but it was a bad team. Or no, it's the Wizards. So yeah, should be another win there. Mavericks 4-2, they look great. The Lakers 4-2, they look pretty damn great as well, although they haven't been as good as they looked in the first 2 games. Grizzlies moving up the standings. The Spurs are at 500, which is in large part to do because Chris Paul has been awesome. They've had some struggles getting Wemby the ball properly. There's also been a lot of good Sohan moments and good stats from him. I do feel like there have been a lot of times where I think they looked to Sohan to score the ball more than they should when Wemby is on the floor, but I can't fault the guy for doing it if he's going to do it rather efficiently. The Timberwolves have looked disappointing to me thus far. They did get a win against the Denver Nuggets, but I still just do not love this construction of this roster. Anthony Edwards has been hitting his threes. He's been taking a shitload of them, and at first he was shooting like 33%, but that percentage has slowly gone up, and though I do wish that he would take a little bit more mid-range shots just purely from an aesthetic and enjoyment of the game standpoint, can't fault the guy for, especially for a team that's three-point shooting got substantially worse after trading Cat, can't fault them for wanting to do it more. Houston Rockets 3-3. They've had a couple of stinker games in a row where they otherwise started the year pretty strong. Fred VanVleet has looked fucking horrible. Kings 3-3. Nuggets 3-3. There was that whole Drake and DeMar drama with the Kings game as well. I'm not gonna bother getting into that. Pelicans 3-4. The Clippers are 2-4. They started the season 2-1, and I was like, damn, maybe they might be decent, but no, they haven't. Jazz 0-6. That's right where they need to be. I'm glad they're actually finally being terrible. Unfortunately, the one negative byproduct of that has been a lot of that terribleness has come from Keontae George continuing to just brick every shot that he takes. So that's disappointing. That's all I really got to say. Not much to add, where the first couple of games was kind of not too much to interpret with the standings there. Out of the gate, I'm going to be updating my thoughts on these standings as the year goes along. But yeah, sorry that this video was like very much just one story, but that one story I just had a lot to say about, and it was pretty much the biggest story of the night for pretty obvious reasons. So yeah, leave Joel Embiid the fuck alone. That is it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, and goodbye.